Wilson-Raybould has more to say to the House Justice Committee. In a letter, the former Attorney General says she wants to supplement her testimony with emails and text conversations between her and key players in the Trudeau government. But the committee decided in a controversial move this week to shut down the probe on SNC-Lavalin. The Prime Minister was asked about it today. He had this to say.
The reason the former Attorney General was able to speak fulsomely to everything that happened in regards to Lavalin while she was Attorney General is because the government took the unprecedented step of waiving both cabinet confidentiality and solicitor-client privilege in regards to this matter. This is something that Canadians were preoccupied about because, indeed, they want to know that, yes, their government is going to stand up for workers and jobs, but that we're going to do it in a way that upholds the rule of law and the integrity of our institutions.
To look into this new drop in the bucket in a story that has grabbed headlines for the past 6 weeks, and the 30-hour voting marathon in the House that ended just before 1 a.m., we are joined by our tired MPs, Conservative MP Erin O'Toole, NDP House Leader Peter Julian, and for the Liberals, Pam Damoff. Thank you for being here. The three of you look pretty good for people who haven't slept.
Lots of coffee.
Yeah, that's always a good one. I want to start with you. So this was a filibuster sort of organized by the Conservatives. Did it work?
I think it did. And in fact, the procedural votes we were doing on estimates is really the most impactful way the opposition can stop the process of government. So the government were using their budget as a way to try and shut down inquiry on the SNC scandal. They shut down the inquiry at the Justice Committee. So by going through the estimates line by line, we were showing the Liberal government that we weren't going to take a cover-up. We weren't going to allow them to keep Ms. Wilson-Raybould from not saying her truth. We were not going to allow them to turn the page by shutting down a committee behind closed doors. And it meant we were in the House a lot. It meant we're holding up the business of government. But Mr. Trudeau should just allow someone to speak. 1 hour worth of time, and they can get back onto their agenda. So why are they hiding it?
Okay, so you wanted to show the Liberals something, and I think perhaps they got the message, but how about the people out there? How about the Canadian people that were watching this and looking at the bickering about, hey, Mr. Speaker, he's having a chocolate bar, and you know, it was interesting theater to us. But I'm wondering, Canadians out there, when they see this, do they just not go, ah, politicians, you know, seriously?
There might be a bit of that, but look, in the last month and a half, we've had the resignations of the most senior people around Justin Trudeau. 2 of his senior ministers have resigned, expressing no confidence in him. They're shutting down the inquiry that's at the heart of all these resignations. So I think Canadians know there's something at the heart of this, going to the Prime Minister's own ethics. We want to talk about that because we think governing and leadership is about taking responsibility, and the Prime Minister has not to this date.
I certainly understand the frustrations of the official opposition party, and what we have taken as our tact is to call for public inquiry. Jagmeet Singh has been relentless in calling for that. We believe Canadians want to get to the bottom of this, and procedurally in committees we have been pushing, as have other opposition parties, to make sure that Jody Wilson-Raybould actually gets a chance to tell her whole truth. And I think her letter today indicates how important that is to her. She feels very strongly that she needs to get all of that information out to Canadians. And I would suggest right across this country, Canadians are seized with this idea that the rule of law should govern in Canada, and nobody is above the law. And what transpired with SNC-Lavalin is contrary to all those values that we hold dear. Now, the problem is we're not getting the answers that we need from the Prime Minister and from the Liberal government. And that's why I think it's important, regardless of whatever procedural tactics the parties take, that ultimately we get to the truth. And then Canadians can judge how they feel about the Prime Minister's actions.
So if what Jody Wilson-Raybould, if these emails, if her letter to the committee and whatever documents she will submit to them does reopen, she does reveal new things, don't you think it's time to let her come back to the committee then?
Well, we haven't seen any of that. So I think you said about 3 or 4 or 5 different if and if and if in the question. But just to talk about the votes last night, it's a huge leap of logic to somehow connect a filibuster with the budget, and to give credit where credit is due to the New Democratic Party. They chose the items in the budget they wanted to support, and they chose the items that they didn't want to support. The Conservatives voted against funding for veterans. They funded against border security. They voted against funding for women's organizations. I mean, they voted against all of these things, some of which they claim to support. So in terms of advancing what's important to Canadians, I would argue that we are trying to talk about what's important to Canadians, and the opposition is trying to not talk about things like creating jobs, lifting people out of poverty, funding organizations that are dealing with sexual assaults and gender-based violence. I mean, that's what's important to people. Certainly in my riding, that's what's important to people.
So, committees were canceled, question period was canceled. Sort of the business of government, not to say that a filibuster is not, an expression of democracy, but the House won't be sitting next week. The budget has come and gone. Now the finance minister is going to crisscross the country and sell his budget, and you haven't had time, the two opposition parties, to grill him on it. What happens? This budget just goes across the country without your voices being heard on it, because the day of the budget, all you wanted to talk about was Jody Wilson-Raybould.
Well, it will come back. There will be a budget implementation bill. In fact, it was this second bill where they snuck in the SNC provision last year. So there'll be a lot of debate on the budget, but we aren't going to allow Mr. Trudeau to just shut down committees, use their majority where it suits them. And to go to Pam's point, the estimates are not the budget. So that all of those things we were voting on were what the government estimates will be spent until the public accounts come in. So normally they're voted on in once. We broke them down into 150 to really show the government that they can use their majority to cover up or block Ms. Wilson-Raybould from testifying. We're going to use our procedural abilities to slow down their ability to talk. Well, she wants to come back, and you won't let her.
Okay, but I want to ask you this, seeing that the three parties are here. So yesterday, Judy Sgro said she can stand up, Liberal MP, she can stand up in the House of Commons on a point of privilege and speak and tell her story. So would that be acceptable to the opposition?
She has that privilege as an MP. She's also a lawyer, and she has obligations to the Law Society and the rules governing professional conduct for lawyers. A lot of people don't realize she's taking that very seriously. She's gotten advice from a former Supreme Court judge. I think that's why she needs Prime Minister Trudeau to say, speak on anything. Right now, he's given her a very narrow waiver of privilege that didn't include discussion.
I'm wondering, Peter Julian, are we splitting hairs here? She has a privilege. We know that when Jerry Butts, the Prime Minister's former top aide, testified with the same privileges being lifted, he actually did speak of the cabinet shuffle. He did speak to these things. It was the same privilege that was lifted. So would you accept that? Would you accept that as sufficient to have a colleague, an MP, stand up in the House and say the rest of her story?
Well, I think Jody Wilson-Raybould, as somebody who's been honest and forthright as Attorney General and ultimately lost her job as a result. She was fired. It seems from all indications that she was fired for doing the right thing. When she says she feels constrained by what the Prime Minister has imposed on her, then I think Canadians can take that to the bank, that this is something that needs to be removed so that she can speak fully. She's asked for it. I think Canadians want to see her receive that. What the Prime Minister hasn't explained in any way is why he's refusing to grant her that ability. And we're hearing from Jane Philpott as well that there is a lot more to learn about this appalling scandal. I would suggest the budget, because you mentioned that earlier. The budget sank like a stone because the budget was so poor. Given what needs are out there right across the country. In my neck of the woods, affordable housing is in crisis, and the Liberals offered some kind of half-baked, lukewarm program that doesn't touch at all the younger families that are struggling to find affordable housing. So the reason why the budget has had very little impact is because it was so poorly conceived. And I think part of that is because the government seems consumed with this SNC-Lavalin scandal and trying to cover it up. And so they're not even doing a good job of governing. That's why we need to get to the truth, and that's why a public inquiry would be the best course for Mr. Trudeau to take.
Would you be satisfied if she got up in the House and said what Judy, the suggestion that Judy Sgro put yesterday to have her come in the House and speak her piece?
And that would be a decision that she would have to make herself. I can't speak on behalf of Jody Wilson-Raybould or Jane Philpott if that's what they choose to do.
No, but as a Liberal MP, you have an MP in your midst, two of them actually, that are basically sniping at the government and weakening the Liberal Party. That is, we see the polls, we see the results of this. So as a Liberal MP, you probably want this to end. Would you want her to stand up in the House and say what she has to say?
As I said, it's up to her what she wants to do. I truly am focused on what's in the budget. It's been extremely well received. Certainly the opposition and to some extent the media want to talk about other things. But the number of really good things that were in that budget, things that no one is talking about, the ones they are, like housing affordability and pharmacare, but the ones they aren't talking about, like funding for the Terry Fox Research Institute to transform cancer research. I mean, those are really important initiatives that are in there, and I'm going to spend the next week out there talking to people about those. And quite honestly, the focus of the Justice Committee and the Ethics Commissioner has been on SNC-Lavalin and what had transpired around that, and the Prime Minister did give her the ability to speak on those issues.
I'm going to have to leave it at that. Thanks to the three of you. I'm hoping you're going to get some good rest this weekend, and I guess we'll see you in a week and a half when the House comes back. Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.